So the first object we'd like to show is actually the oldest item in our collection, and it is the first treaty that the United States entered into in 1778.
So most Americans and also international folks understand that America's independence was in 1776, and part of the recognition upon these revolutionaries was that not only did you need to have friends and allies that were going to fight your enemies in Great Britain, but also the establishment of economic security. You know, this was vital really to this new nation and something that was really on their minds. As students of Adam Smith and understanding the wealth of nations, they understood very much that poor nations are weak nations. So part of the negotiations with France had to do with not only getting funding and military support, but also establishing this Treaty of Commerce. And this was accomplished in 1778. The French weren't quite sure that the Americans were going to be able to pull it off. But after the Battle of Saratoga in 1776, it was pretty much clear that the Americans could actually do this. And so Benjamin Franklin, Silas Deane, and Arthur Lee, who are really Americans' first professional diplomats, conducted these two treaties. And this Treaty of Commerce was essential. It granted France most favored nation trading status. And the French were very excited about being able to sort of get into that economic trading war with Great Britain after the war was over. And this treaty would remain in effect for several years afterwards.
So our new nation is emerging here with our first treaties and establishing bilateral relations. And we started sending our diplomats out abroad. And there was some debate in the first half of the 19th century about what should our diplomats look like? Should they wear uniforms?
Very serious.
Should they,
Yes.
or should they dress more American? And
Right.
what was American? Because this was a new nation emerging.
Exactly, because you don't want to show up like a farmer, right? If you're
Right.
the minister to, these courts of Europe. So that was a real problem. There wasn't any real serious directive for these ministers who were going to European countries until 1853. Jefferson, as Secretary of State, had mentioned, well, you always need to conduct yourself in a very, plain and simple dress as the American citizen, but it created a lot of confusion. And then over the course of the next years, a lot of ministers were taking it upon themselves to kind of glam themselves up, a little bling here and there, until finally in the 1850s, one Secretary Marcy, William Marcy, he just had it, and he said, this is not appropriate. We need to actually have a full standard of this. And so he gave this very, they called it circulars back then, a very specific circular, a directive, right, about what you can and cannot wear. But the problem was, your simple dress had to be acceptable enough to appear before a king, before a monarch. So that was a little bit tough. And so the uniform that we have in our collection, which I think would be good for you to speak to, and then we can kind of go into its significance.
Sure. So we have an image of the diplomatic uniform that we have in our collection, and it belonged to U.S. Minister John Mason when he went to France in the 1850s. And so he had it specially designed. It was made as a compromise, what Alison was just talking about. You had to be presentable, at the monarch's court, but you didn't want to get too elaborate. And so you can tell that it's a very simple suit, modeled after a naval uniform, yet it's not a military uniform, a bicorn hat made out of wool. Simple yet elegant is how I like to describe it.